Earlier today, we released the new Clutchy 5.0 update. In this video, I'm going to be diving into all of the non-form Clutchy components. So really anything as far as background video, buttons, carousel, and just explaining how these components are going to work within Clutchy UI, cover some of the basics, how they're styled, the fact that they have certain style attributes that are exposed that you can use to style a given component, showing any type of internal state mechanism, whether a component is open or expanded, and any of those states are exposed and how you can use those to your advantage. And of course, also doing a little bit of a dive into composing some of the components together, maybe rebuilding some of the composition of the components, just to give you a general understanding and idea of the new Clutch UI. This update really focuses on rebuilding our UI library from the ground up. We realized that with our last component library, a lot of elements would, whenever they weren't rendering something directly, we would remove that content from the DOM, which would hinder your SEO experiences and any type of search engine crawling, because that data or any type of content that you had on your page was not being exposed to those crawlers. The key change of Clutch UI is the fact that it is always mounted. We never unmount any components from the DOM, so your content is always there 100% of the time. The other thing is that we decided to go with a different library to base our component library off of. So we are now using React Aria under the hood, which provides a whole slew of better accessibility features for keyboard navigation, screen readers, and the like. And the final thing that we wanted to focus on is making our component library designer first. We realized that a lot of our components in our old library were very complex. So one of the key benefits of this new update is that we've simplified and abstracted some of that complexity because it was somewhat unnecessary. So let's go ahead and do a whirlwind run of what we have shipped so far and what is available with this update. So currently, if you update to the latest Clutch UI version 5.0, or you start a brand new project, what you'll get is Clutch UI without any of the form elements. So you'll have background video, button, carousel, dialog, lightboxes, sheets, progress bars, etc. So starting with something basic, one of the changes that we've also gone through and added is that we'll start with button. So button's a really basic example. We have several different templates that we're now going to be shipping with all of our components. So we'll organize these from something that is more simple and basic. So this is just a button or just a submit button. So this is just like different functionalities of a button. And then we'll get into more like not necessarily advanced, but more something that's more styled or has a couple of different properties that are applied to it. So then we have these other templates for button that are now getting into the realm of maybe like creating a design system or like different ways to work with a button. Instead of using text, you're using an icon as well, or just an icon. So at the very basis, when you add just a plain basic button, you get a button with a property, an on-press property already exposed to you. There are more properties that you can use with button by searching and opening up the more properties. And this is the same for all of the other components within the Clutch UI library. So we'll give you what we believe for that given template or certain type of styling. We'll give you the property that we believe that you'll need or that you're most likely trying to work with. So in this case, a on-press event, and you can use this on-press event to add an action. Here in this case, it looks like in the WordPress library, that's in this project, we have the ability to create a post. We could add that create post to the button. And now whenever you click this button, it will attempt to create a post for you. And remove that property and we'll add it back because I did not mean to remove it. I just meant to clear the value. Then the next thing is that each component from Clutch UI will be styled. And then what we try and do is we try and give you some minimal styling for a lot of these components. So here, as we scroll through the style panel, we've gone ahead and applied some minimal styling. Now, this button doesn't have any type of hover on press active events or anything. And to do that, each of the components that have some type of like state-based styling, we expose those states here in the states window. So if you click this window, we can see the different ways that we can style button based on its states, whether a button is disabled or the focus visible or focused or pressed. So if we grab the press state here and then we apply some styling, so we give this a background of red. Since we have this press state active and we're currently styling it, we get to see a preview of what that looks like. Then if we go and click the button in play mode, we get the press state showing there. So that's just the minimal button. That's just a very basic plain button, plain template. The other templates that we have, as you saw here, if we go back to button, we start to get a little bit more style-like. So we've got these primary, secondary, what I had mentioned, getting into what is like the beginning of a design system button. So if I drag out this button, we get a button with some rounded corners, some slightly different styling, and you'll notice that the states box also has a lot more states applied, and each of these states have some type of styling applied to them. So then whenever we go and hover, we get a hover effect, or press, we get a pressed effect. And so it's going to be this same approach for a lot of the other templates inside of Clutch UI. Because we're talking about button, let's grab a component with a button. I think dropdown menu is a good example. So we've got a very basic dropdown. So let's just grab this dropdown with 2 columns. We'll add that to the page. And we get a wrapping component, because this is a template that makes up our dropdown. And then inside of this wrapping component, there is a button. This button is tied to an action. This action comes from the dropdown itself. So dropdown exposes some actions that you can use to build your UIs. So in this case, the button is tied to a toggle menu. So when you click the button, it toggles the menu open and close, and you see this nice 2 layout dropdown template. Now, if you wanted to change the functionality of your button and you didn't want to have it toggle, but you only wanted it to open the menu but not close the menu, you can set it to the open menu action, which I know I clicked through that pretty quickly. So let me just open this back up. As I mentioned, there are actions that dropdown physically exposes, and it gives you some actions on how to work and configure and make functionality happen within the dropdown. It'll be like this with other components like Dialog or Carousel. There's going to be actions that are exposed by those components that give you this ability to create different types of functionality inside your projects. Another thing that you may have noticed is that the dropdown has turned and highlighted yellow, saying that dropdown is missing a trigger. So we try to be smart about some of our components, because there could be a time while you're building and you either disconnect a button from a dropdown or delete a button entirely from your dropdown. And then you'll realize that you have a drop-down component in your composition, but there is physically no way to open that drop-down. So this button exists and there's a drop-down here, but clicking doesn't do anything. We're trying to be smarter and provide these hints that let you know when there's a actionable item that is hidden, cannot be opened anyway. As I add a open menu action here to the button, that warning now goes away and we can then open our menu. Other things, there's other components that are also composed and made up of different parts. So if we look at carousel, one of these templates is a carousel with some dot indicators that you can click to navigate throughout the carousel with some buttons added as well. And if we look through here, we can grab this carousel. So this carousel is using the progress bar that is further down in this list here. If we grab this carousel, which I tried to drag that carousel and I drug it into nowhere. There we go. So now we have a carousel. This carousel has buttons with actions that are applied from the carousel. If we look at, I'm clicking new action here to see what other actions are exposed. And what we see is that carousel also gives us not only just a next and a previous, but also a scroll to and a play and a stop action, depending on how you want to make carousel work. Then we have a progress bar. So there's a progress bar that you can use to style your carousel in a way that gives users an idea of how far they are in the position of the carousel. So essentially this progress bar has a value and this value is being bound to a state. So not only are actions exposed from certain components, but some states are also exposed from certain components. So carousel exposes a couple different states here. And in this case, in progress, we're binding the value to the current scroll progress of carousel. So that's how combining different components with each other work in the system. Really quickly taking a look at carousel, we can look through the composition of carousel and that it's just made up of a root carousel component, and it has individual slides that are wrapped inside of a slides component. And that's really all there is to it. Each of these components can be styled individually. If you want to style your entire carousel and you want to give carousel a background, you can apply a background directly to it. Some other ways to style components other than using the states window is using something called conditional classes. If we grab disclosure, for example, disclosure gives you a component that shows or hides a bit of content. Inside this disclosure, we have essentially two parts, a trigger that contains some text and an icon, and the content itself. So the unique thing about the way that the trigger works is that the trigger has a chevron icon inside of it. And then the chevron rotates when the disclosure is in an expanded state. Earlier, while we were looking at carousel, we saw that the carousel expanded several different states that the carousel could be in. Disclosure also exposes a expanded or not expanded, or exposes an expanded state. And then that's just a true or false value on whether or not that component is expanded. So what I have created here is an expanded class that's tied to the icon. And then when this expanded class is set, it's going to rotate the icon 180 degrees here on this transform property. And so the way that's working is that this class has been turned into a conditional class. All classes that you add in this classes window by default are blue, and that That's just how they look by default, is that most classes that you see and you click on in this window are going to be blue. Whenever they are green, that means that it is now a conditional class and that it is only going to apply this class based on some other condition. I'm just binding this class to the state of disclosure. And so when the expanded state is true, it's going to apply this transform of 180 degrees. And that's how this icon gets rotated. Again, this can be used on individual properties like I showed in the progress bar of the carousel, or you can use exposed states to either set or not set certain classes on any given component. The other unique thing, the way that we've built these components, we tried to cut things down and use less components and be more mindful of what we are giving you as a user to style and work with inside of your projects. If you drag out a dialog, for example, or what I want to say is we do a lot of reusability within Clutchy now. For example, Dialog, Sheet, and Lightbox are all dialog components under the hood that have or don't have an overlay attached to them. So if we take a look at Dialog, there are a couple of templates. One, you get like a modal dialog with an overlay, and then there's a modal dialog with no overlay. And so if you drag a modal dialog out, we see that it comes with an overlay. Ignore these form elements here because those form elements are not ready yet. And then we drag out, let's add the sheet and also the lightbox. So if we'll add the lightbox right above, and then we'll also add a sheet. And we'll just do a sheet right. So if we open these up, we see that the sheet, again, is just made up of a button with an overlay and a dialog, or the carousel lightbox is a set of buttons that have images placed inside them. When you click on an image, it's going to open a overlay and dialog, and then scroll to a position that the carousel, to a position within the carousel. So a lot of the components are able to be reused in a multitude of different ways just by applying some type of styling. We've tried to create some experiences with these templates that get you what we believe is going to be most of the way there, but it's really open for maximum customization and just reusing, combining, and merging different components together to work with them. So we really like this new direction and how we've designed these components, trying to maximize designer friendly first, exposing only certain level of properties based on templates, giving you a list of different templates that you can use to configure and build your projects. And the fact that these components have accessibility built in under the hood and making it really a very plug and play system for you to focus on the design aspect of building your projects and be able to just drag items out and then style them, change the layout, do what you need to do to ship faster, build quicker. So I'm happy that we're releasing Clutch UI 5.0. Eager to hear you all's feedback. We'll see you in the next one.